About 10 years ago, something happened. My wife also works at the medical school at A.T. Still University, but in missions, she finds the students. And she gives talks like to people like you all the time about becoming doctors or dentists or whatever else. But as she's often in a dress, being very professional, as she was coming towards the end of her talk, she had materials to hand out if they were interested in being students. But being in a dress and the materials laying on the floor here, she was in this quandary as to what to do because everybody was watching her like you guys or me. And so she didn't just want to turn around in her dress. She decides instead of turning around and showing her butt and getting her stuff, which I would have done, she goes down on one knee and she scoops the material up with her hands. She lifts it off the ground. She's going to do this waiter move and bring it forward. So she's squatting, scooping, bending, and standing up all at the same time. And she gets about halfway up and she gets this shearing pain through her chest, and she drops everything, and she can't breathe. And of course, her staff are there with her, and they realize something's not right. Luckily, being at a medical school, you're never more than 10 or 20 feet from a doctor. So they go flying out of the room, and within seconds are back with Dr. Collins. He doesn't know, all they're knowing is something's wrong. Well, you know, imagine that something's wrong. He looks at her, and all he can figure out is she's turning blue, because she's not breathing. She's pounding her chest and she can't breathe. So he thinks she's choking. So he gets behind her and he does the Heimlich. And he pulls, and a couple times, and of course nothing comes up. But in this process of stretching everything in her body, she is able to catch her breath in gasps. And so they cart her off because at least now she's breathing. So, you know, breathing first, you gotta breathe. And so she's breathing. So they cart her over to the doctor's office who just performed this on her, because what everyone's saying is, and I get a phone call, your wife is having a heart attack and she's over in Dr. Collins' office. It's like, what? And so I go in there, it's like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Pain, I can't breathe. And I'm thinking, I can't believe this. You know, well, they run the test because they can actually check your blood and they know if you're really having a heart attack, because I guess your body does some kind of enzymes or something. Again, I'm not a physician, but I know they know when you're having a heart attack and when you're not having a heart attack. And she certainly was not having a heart attack. What they determined was she had a mass dislocation of her ribs, and she did it to herself. She didn't even get smacked with a 300-pound pig, which would at least be understandable. But there was nothing that, except that she just twisted herself into a bizarre pretzel. But even that wasn't really anything that was too, you know, you think, well, yeah, it was kind of, but not anything, you know, no more than some of these dance steps. But what she had done is somehow the sympathetic nervous system, which runs your lungs, basically, something got pinched in that movement and there was no more breathing. And when he pulled her, it released that nerve just enough now she could breathe. But they got 3 DOs once they determined she wasn't having a heart attack, and they basically stretched her back into shape, and that was it. That was like 10 years ago, never had another problem with it. So I look at that pig story thinking, really? But then I had something in real life that could have been the same thing. Now, had Dr. Collins not come over, had she just fallen, there was no doctor around, she would have died, and we would have called it a massive heart attack. And I would have never done an autopsy or anything like that. I mean, I would have been sad, but I thought, you know, it's pretty obvious. I mean, that's the way it is. And see, we do this every day. Things that we think they are could be structure. She didn't even think it was structure. I mean, she was convinced when I'm saying, I'm having a heart attack. She didn't even think, well, I was in the, you know, it's like, no, there's no way. That would stop me from breathing. You know, just standing up, you know, turning my arm a little bit, pushing off my knee, that's not gonna, you know, that's nothing. And so it did teach me, wow, I can imagine what Dr. Still walked upon, because I walked into the same thing, and then it was just as much a miracle when everything was done. 3 people treated her, it's done. That's it, no more problem. So it is fascinating. Body, mind, spirit, according to Dr. A.T. Still. The triune. And as I mentioned, we have the physical body and we have the intangible, which is what makes you cut your hair that way and you wear that scarf and you wear those shoes. We pick and choose things that feel right to our spirit. And, basically, it's intangible, but each person is unique. And you hear that, and we really are unique. And doctors still love that about people. And so the mind lets the two talk back and forth. And so we have the physical and the mind that connects the two. And so the mind has to function. People often think mind and spirit are the same thing, but to some degree, the spirit almost works through the mind. And I'll tell you how that actually happens. And we got all this, I'm trying to show this kind of like the brain has all this activity going on. So here's the thing. A guy by the name of Stuart Hameroff, he's an anesthesiologist. And he's an MD, he's not even a DO. But he puts people under for surgery. And he says, and what I would do is I'd be the last person they'd see before they went under, and then I'd be the first person they see when they come out of surgery. And he goes, the funny thing about it is that when they would be in surgery and I would bring them out, they didn't realize that they'd actually been through surgery. And some of these were 10, 13-hour surgeries, really pretty invasive, heavy deal stuff. And I would bring them out, and the first thing they would say is, I don't want the surgery. I'm afraid. I've changed my mind. And he'd say, oh no, it's all done. Perfectly fine. What do you mean it's all done? You've had the surgery. And they look at, no, I haven't. I would know if I had had surgery. And he would think, what did I do to them that their spirit has completely lost connection to the body of what was going on? Because if we go to bed at night and we have a bad dream and we wake up, we know what it was. He goes, but in surgery, they completely were convinced that nothing had happened. And a lot happened. So I wanted to find out what it was. So I started looking at what the chemicals do that are in the anesthesia. And he goes, your neurons, which are the highways of memories and thoughts, and they're wet and they're kind of slow. But inside of them, what makes them up like the bones of our body are these things called microtubules, like little chips in a computer. And they vibrate 1 trillion times a second. And they actually even have these flashes. And when they have these flashes, I believe that's ESP, he said. I think that you can be here in the person and anywhere in the universe. Or anywhere. And he goes, it's really fascinating how that works, because what happens is the anesthesia makes those stop. They just stop vibrating. And it's the closest thing to death, to be under. And when I bring him back, the vibration starts up again. And he says, I think this is where the soul is. That in this 1 trillion vibrations a second, something is happening that you have access to. The spirit has just unlimited access. And that when I stop that, the body is shut off from its spirit. And until that's reactivated, that spirit is basically kind of like can't get back into the body. And so we hear about people being brought back and all these different things that happen. Again, provided the body comes back and the vibration starts back up, spirit's back there. So what was fascinating to him was, I think things are actually being kept there. For instance,